Hello, everyone. Welcome to a wonderful, amazing, special episode of Outside the Studio. This is Tessa Tovar, your host, as usual. I'm very excited to welcome Vanessa Loder to the show today. Vanessa Loder is the author of this beautiful book, The Soul Solution. Among many other things, I'll give you a brief overview of her bio so you can get a little bit more info about her. She is an inspirational keynote speaker and sought-after expert on women's leadership, mindfulness, stress management, and sustainable success. She's been featured in Forbes, Fast Company, Glamour, and the Huffington Post, among others. She received her MBA from Stanford University, is a certified executive coach, and is trained in neuro-linguistic programming, past life regression, and Vipassana meditation. Vanessa, I'm so honored to have you here. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's a joy to be here.
Yeah, well, likewise. In preparing for this conversation, I've watched a couple of your TED Talks, and everything that you were speaking to is really landing with me as a fellow female entrepreneur, and having had an experience a little over a decade in the corporate work world and feeling like, oh my God, this is sucking the life out of me, having to leave it and do something on my own, found everything you had to say very helpful. Yeah. And so one thing I just immediately jumped out at me in this TED Talk, and I'll make a link in the show notes to this particular TED Talk, was the suggestion to prepare a little bit less when you're thinking about maybe it's a presentation at work or, for example, a podcast, if that's something that you do. And that's something that I always grapple with, because I find that when I do prepare a little bit less and when I show up and I just kind of let the conversation go wherever it will, maybe meandering, that it feels more natural. It feels like it's more fun. And I think that's the point, right? This is why I'm doing this work. So thank you for that invitation and that reminder. I love it.
You're so welcoming. I feel like preparing less, it has a twofold purpose. One is it reduces burnout, unnecessary, exhaustion, but then two, it creates space for the magic, which is what you were just speaking to.
Yeah.
And so sometimes when we prepare less and we set a clear intention, it creates this space where there's more magic and serendipity and alignment that can happen.
Yeah, definitely.
Love that you noticed that.
Well, and also I feel like, at least I know this for me, I rely a little bit more on my intuition, and that builds self-confidence because, like I mentioned, having spent so long in the corporate work world, I really shut the intuition down in that world. And that to me felt like a survival mechanism. And it felt like I had to do that because I came from a place where I felt like I wore my heart on my sleeve and would come home from work crying all the time. So really had to shut that down in order to get up and go to work the next day. All right. So with that said, I want to dive into this idea, this theme of can women really have it all? And so I think it's this idea of, breaking the glass ceiling. How do we be mothers and wives and successful business women, or whatever it is that we do for work, for career? Can we really have it all? Can we really be, quote unquote, good at it all? And what does that even really mean?
Yeah. Oh, I mean, it's such a layered question, and I could talk for like 5 hours about this topic. But the first thing I think it's important to recognize is I've come to feel that even the question, can women have it all, is kind of a result of what I've coined as trickle down patriarchy, which meaning, why aren't we asking that of men? The question, can women have it all, implies women should do it all for everyone else all the time. And I think that's part of the problem. And that's part of the reason why women are so exhausted and fried and burned out. And so part of, I believe we can have it all, but we also need to redefine what it all even is, and
Mm-hmm.
have it come more from our core values, from our longings and our desires, rather than what society, which is a patriarchal model, is telling us we should do, which is often being a human giver instead of a human being, and taking care of others and not taking care of ourselves. But yeah, I really do believe we can have it all when we redefine what it all means for us. And I was even talking to a client last night who recently, in the last couple of years, left a corporate job. She's now started her own consulting business. And she said, Vanessa, my goal was to work a third the amount of hours and make my salary, make whole on my corporate salary. And I'm doing that this year. I'm on track to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, I work until 2 p.m. and then I'm with my kids. And it's not always easy every single day, having them from 2 to 5 p.m. But she said, I've been able to create and design a life where I actually do feel really good and really balanced, and I'm living my values, and I'm doing, high impact work, but also having flexibility in my schedule. So these kinds of situations are possible. But we have to be willing to get really clear on what matters to us and take a stand for that, which I think for a lot of us, at least me and women in general, it can feel challenging.
Yeah, absolutely. I resonate with that so much because having left a six-figure job, doing this work on my own now, I'm feeling a little bit like, and I'm sure I'm not alone here. What is it that I'm missing? Because I definitely am not making up that income gap. I'm not even close to it. I'm working at an extreme deficit. So I'm wondering, this is the conversation I have with myself. I'd love to hear your perspective. Does that mean I'm not listening to, some inner calling? Does it mean I'm not doing something right? Does it mean that I chose the wrong path? Why am I not, quote unquote, making an impact, in this way of receiving monetary income?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a big question, but
Yeah.
I will say from my own life as a fellow entrepreneur, it definitely has taken me longer to make the amount of money I would have liked. And for me, at least, it's required unpacking a whole lot of limiting beliefs that I had.
Mm.
Like I had one that, I can make a lot of money or do something creative that I love, but I can't have both. So there was that one. I think doing work, for me at least, doing work that I really, really love and really enjoy, if I were to also make a lot of money doing that, that would be like too much goodness. So I had to like squash that for a while. So there's been a lot of layers that I've needed to unpack to step up in a bigger way with my business. And every time I reach a new level of income, frankly, there's been like a series of old beliefs and fears that I've had to clear to get to that new level. Most recently for me, there was even one around like with my book coming out and becoming sort of stepping out onto the world stage more as a spiritual teacher. I had a lot of unconscious fears around being so sensitive to energy and having fear that people would project their shadow stuff and their needs onto me, and like not wanting to handle that level of energy coming at me. So therefore keeping myself kind of small and hidden. So I've just done a lot to clear that. So, I think it's very individual and unique. Like, what are the things that have been getting in the way of that? And I think if I could do it all over again in terms of making more money sooner, I wish I didn't focus on it as a problem so much and instead appreciated all the progress I was making and all the wonderful resources that were coming in. And the truth is, I was beautifully supported in the years when I wasn't making as much money as I wanted with my business. I actually had income coming from other sources, and I was not needing for anything. It was more my ego that wanted to have the same monetary value as the old job in finance, to prove to everyone that this new work I'm doing is just as important and just as valuable. So I was coming from this like needy, fear-based, egoic place in my need to like prove my worthiness with the salary versus following my joy, following my bliss, following my unique genius, and having the money be a result of that.
Yeah. Definitely. Those are just things that I feel like it's no matter how long you've been on this path, it's helpful to be reminded of. It's so easy to forget. And you're right. It takes a lot of unpacking and it takes a lot of clearing. I wonder what some of that clearing work looks like for you. And I know it's different for all of us, but I always love to hear each person's own individual, like, oh, this worked for me.
I've done all kinds of things. One thing that was really cool that I did, I don't know if this will resonate with anyone, but I realized for me, at least, when I left my corporate job, I worked in private equity, investment banking, a lot of jobs in finance. I kind of threw the baby out with the bathwater and made like corporate America wrong for a lot of years in my own mind. And I sort of disengaged from that part of myself that was more analytical and linear and rational, and went like way opposite the other direction, like a teenager kind of rebelling, like, I don't need any of that, I'm going to be independent and free. And long story short, like a year or two ago, I ended up doing this beautiful ceremony that I just made up. I highly recommend following your intuition and creating your own ceremonies. But I was cleaning out some folders in my office and I found my old pay stubs from when I worked in finance. And first of all, it was so cool because it was for a tax year. I thought my husband like always made so much more than me. And then I looked at it and was like, oh, I made a lot more than him that year. And not in a competitive way, but as I was starting this new business, it didn't always feel good to not be making as much. Like I wanted to contribute, and so it felt really empowering to recognize how much money I had made. And I ended up doing a whole ceremony where I took the pay stubs and I put them on my altar, and I like did a whole like gratitude practice and honoring them. And it was very emotional, and I was crying and just honoring the parts of me that did that work and what I valued about them, and honoring the income that I received and how wonderful that was. And I think bringing some of that forward into my future. And I'm trying to remember if I don't think I burned them. I think I just put them on my altar. And I'm not kidding, within like 48 hours of doing this whole ceremony and feeling all this energy move, I had this big, like $20,000 new client come in, and I don't think that was a coincidence personally, because I was honoring it. And it kind of sent an energetic signal like, yes, I like this. I want to receive this. I honor this, versus making some of that wrong.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. Well, and that brings me to the next topic I want to discuss, which is the kind of the myth of the toxic hustle. And I like what you said about throwing the baby out with the bathwater in terms of really demonizing corporate America, because I've done the exact same thing. And also, by now, I've been able to see what that taught me, what all those years, all of those hard skills I gained, the soft skills I gained, and how I can really utilize that to stay organized and present and make progress in the work that I do now. But so for anyone thinking about like making a move or a shift career-wise, or even just energetically, relationally, I still feel myself in this role, in that kind of toxic hustle culture mentality. Mm-hmm. So I wonder, how do we get out of that mindset? And, like, I don't know if it's like a balance, or because I don't want to go completely in the opposite direction and only live in the dream realm. I think we need to have a little bit of both. So how do we walk that line?
Yeah. So for me, there's a fine line between, well, not even a fine line, but there's a difference between when I am working from a place of like intrinsic inspiration and I'm really focused and engaged and I'm getting a lot done, versus when I'm like kind of anxiety fueled, getting a lot done. So that's what I'm referring to as the hustle part. And I liken it to, when you start to learn how to meditate, you learn how to put yourself in the seat of the observer and observe your thoughts so that you don't believe them and you aren't believing the story of them. You're actually witnessing them. It's similar with hustle energy. And what I find helpful is you have to be able to catch yourself when you're in that mode and then intentionally shift into more of a flow state instead. So I call it going from hustle to flow. So the story I use as an example, and then I have embodiment tools to really bring this to life, is I was doing a big launch for one of my online courses many years ago, and I got all stressed out and I was like, okay, I'm going to go to Pete's coffee shop and I'm going to crank out all these emails for the launch. And I don't really drink coffee. I was like, that's what I'm going to do. Go to Pete's. And actually, no, not Pete's, Phil's, which is like, I feel like the coffee's even stronger. So I went to Phil's and I parked and I was like marching down the sidewalk, like I'm so important and busy. And I had this split second where I just caught myself and I went, oh, wait a minute. This is not how I want to work anymore. And I literally stopped in my tracks on the sidewalk so quickly that the woman behind me almost ran into me physically. And I turned around and I marched myself back to my car and I Googled yoga classes near me, because I was like, I need I need to actually chill out and get into more of a, balanced flow state. And as the universe would have it, there was a class starting in like 15 minutes that was 5 minutes away. And so I went to it, and I'm not kidding. It was like 35 or 40 minutes later, I was in a warrior two pose when I randomly got this thought to reach out to a certain affiliate partner for my marketing of my online course. And that ended up representing like something like 40% of the revenue of that program. And I love that story because it so illustrates the old way and the old paradigm of doing it, which is like push through your exhaustion and just go, 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 and busy as a badge of honor, versus the new paradigm of success that I'm writing about in this book and trying to teach and talk about a lot, especially with burned out women, which is more about trusting yourself, listening to your intuition, creating space for those little whispers to come through, and intentionally getting yourself in a creative flow state so that you can optimize your potential. And so what I recommend is I actually have a couple guided meditations on my website where you actually close your eye, and you could just do this listening to this podcast, but you close your eyes and remember a time when you were in hustle mode, and you just notice, like, what did that feel like in your body? Where do you notice like maybe tension or tightness or clenching? So what does it physiologically feel like when you're in hustle mode? And then you might even ask yourself, what am I saying to myself in my head when I'm in hustle mode? I mean, for me, it's probably some version of, I got to get this done. I'm going to crank this out. I don't know. And what am I believing about myself or the world when I'm in hustle mode? And for me, it's some version of, my value is associated with what I do, what I get done. I have to prove my worthiness. And then you just break state. You can like wiggle your hands to get to like break your state, your energetic state. And then close your eyes and remember a time when you were in flow. When time went by quickly, you looked up and you couldn't believe how much time had passed. And this could be at work, but also doing a personal activity, a hobby, or playing a sport, doing something creative. It's just a time when you were in a kind of a flow state and time went by quickly. And just breathe into that. And just notice, what does that feel like in your body? For me, I feel very open, expansive, relaxed. And notice, what are the thoughts that you're thinking in your mind when you're in a flow state? And for me, it's some version of, I have plenty of time for everything I want and need to do. This is great. I'm enjoying this. I'm exactly where I need to be. What are you believing about yourself or the world when you're in a flow state? And then just allow your eyes to gently open if you were closing them. I wasn't planning to go straight into a little practice, but I think when we tune into those different states, and I'm curious what that was like for you, but you can feel how different they are. And then it's easier to notice when you're in hustle and to stop yourself, observe it instead of being in the hustle. You want to get to the seat of the observer, to name it. Oh, I'm in hustle mode. And then sometimes it's taking 3 deep breaths, or looking at the colors in the room, just doing something to reground yourself.
Yeah.
So what was that like for you with hustle versus flow? What did you notice?
Hustle is so easy to viscerally feel.
Yeah. It's like, boom, there.
Yep. And it's very present. Even just getting ready today, I'm like, oh, there's a million things I want to do. I was like making my to-do list before I started to record. And the tension in my neck and shoulders is ever present. And so with the invitation to relax and to flow, it's like this constant, okay, it's almost like a flex and a soften, a flex and a soften. So it's like a reminder to release, because it's so unconscious for these muscles to start to flex, especially when they're in that state for the majority of the day in my body. And the irony, right? That I teach yoga, I teach meditation, I teach yoga nidra, all of these things. And I really, truly believe, I mean, this is case in point that we teach what we need to
You
learn
most need to learn.
ourselves.
Totally.
Yeah. So, but it's so nice to be able to sit back and have someone else guide and have you remind me that the seat of the observer. I love that. That's something I use in my teaching often. That reminder to zoom out, to take a bird's eye view, and to really kind of look at what is happening, and just getting kind of objective about what is around you.
Yeah. And also just being kind with ourselves, because look, we don't live in a cave in the Himalayas. Like, we're in daily life, and
Yeah.
I caught myself in hustle this morning with my kids because my husband's traveling, and I was trying to do like breakfast, pack their lunches, and, have them choose their clothes because we're going camping tomorrow morning. And I was like high anxiety, moving very quickly around the kitchen, in that kind of energy. And I just caught myself and paused and took a breath. And then I think 5 minutes later, I went back into that, back into
Yeah.
that mode. But I just try to remind myself. I love the line from Jen Sincero's book, "You Are a Badass," and I put this in my book where she says, "I'm just a little bunny doing my best." And so, I'll often remind myself that. And yeah, it's okay that we get caught in hustle mode maybe 27 times in a day or whatever it is, because we're in a modern world. There's a lot of like sensory stimulation. There's a lot with technology and devices, and many of us are overscheduled and all the things. And so just being really kind with yourself when you do notice that you're in that mode. And if you can bring some humor and playfulness to it, I find that really pops you up into a higher vibration and makes it easier to shift out of the like fight or flight mode. Like, oh, look at me, I was just frantically like wiping crumbs off the counter like a crazy lady.
I love that analogy of the bunny. That's so cute. And yes, Jen Sinclair, I'm looking at her. Have you read that You Are a Badass at Making Money?
No.
It's kind of like a sequel. Oh yeah. I mean, it's, Jen Sinclair. I love her candor and the way she writes, and I listened to it and I read the book. So that's another one I'd recommend. I want to switch gears a little bit to something that jumped out at me from the book. And it's something that I've said to other women in my life. I felt it very keenly myself. It's such a relevant topic as we're thinking about kind of the idea of breaking the glass ceiling and showing up and being worthy, being good enough, and deserving the success. And it's from your chapter, Your Energetic Breadcrumbs. It's this particular passage is on page 37. The title of this passage is Permission to Not Be Ready. And I was actually, as I was listening to you talk on your TED Talk, you were talking about the 5-year plan, and I was like, well, what if I can't see that far? It was kind of asking you in my head. But anyways, that's a little side note. We'll put a pin in that and come back.
Yeah.
The passage is, if you are a rule follower accustomed to collecting gold stars, you may believe you need to be qualified or officially prepared before diving into something new. An internal report at Hewlett-Packard showed that men apply for a job when they meet 60% of the qualifications, while women only apply if they meet 100% of them. Mm-hmm. I mean, what is up with this? And how do we shift this kind of thinking? And I get it, and it's true, and I feel it, and I'm sure so many people can resonate, but I'll let you expound upon that.
I mean, well, I have some friends and clients who will even say, well, okay, well, what would a man do in this situation? Or what would my husband do? And sort of channel that to sort of nudge themselves into a more, assertive direction. But I do think women are conditioned to be people pleasers. We're conditioned to like follow the rules and be good girls. I remember one study I read, and I should try to dig it up, where they did a study with kids. I think it was elementary school, and they took a test, and they gave them the same test, but one group they said, oh, you didn't do well. And the other group, they said you did do well on the test. And they split them by gender. And they found that the girls blamed themselves. And they were like, oh, the women, they were told they didn't do well on the test, they were like, oh, I probably should have studied more. Like, I probably didn't, put my best effort in. And the boys blamed external things. They're like, well, the teacher didn't explain the concepts well, and that test was too hard. And I found that fascinating, that at that young of an age, the girls were kind of going into some version of being hard on themselves. But also it's like let's not be hard on ourselves about being hard on ourselves, because we come by this pattern naturally. If you think about the lineage of just being born in a woman's body, it's not been a very safe or empowering place. And so it's understandable that we would want to dot all our I's and cross all our T's, because we could be severely punished if we stepped out of line. Mm-hmm. So I think it's important to acknowledge the history behind us and not go into like self-loathing or self-blame about it all. But yes, how do we get out of this? So I'm a big fan of doing visioning. And I do think just recognizing, okay, maybe I can stretch myself to take action before I feel ready, and just notice what happens and just get like a feedback loop on that. And I often do visioning circles because I find that we can doubt the potential in ourselves and be like, I shouldn't apply for that promotion. But we can often see the potential in other women and be like, of course you should apply for that. You're totally qualified. So whether you do that one-on-one with a girlfriend, or you join, a women's circle where you get that kind of support and encouragement, I think one thing we can do is lift each other up and be that mirror for each other to say like, yes, you should stretch and go for that thing. And also just recognize the high bar that you set for yourself and the perfectionism that you maybe have internalized from our culture's messaging of how women should be and act. One of the stories I tell in the book is when I was getting ready to start doing one-on-one coaching and group coaching programs, I felt like I wasn't ready. And my mentor at the time said, well, how will you know you're ready? I thought about it and I was like, I would basically need to be the Dalai Lama. Like, who am I to tell anyone how to live their life? Like, I'm not some wise person, And she said the best thing to me. She said, Vanessa, all you need to do is find the people who are 3 steps behind where you're at. And those are going to be the perfect people for you to support. And so she helped me give myself permission to not feel ready, but to do it anyway. And I do think when I look at pivotal times in my life, when I was trying to stretch myself, I wasn't quite able to give myself the permission to stretch. But when I got it from someone outside of me, a mentor, a friend, who reflected that back, that sometimes was the thing that allowed me to say, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to give this a try.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. And I did mention the chapter energetic breadcrumbs, and I do want to dive into that concept a little bit more. I think maybe for some of us it might be intuitive, but it comes up a lot in the book. So I'd love to hear you expound upon, how we can follow our energetic breadcrumbs and what you mean by that.
Yeah. So your energetic breadcrumbs are those little moments where you feel really energized and alive. Maybe it feels like little champagne bubbles inside, or for me, sometimes it's almost like some weird invisible inner spidey sense like turns on, when I hear the name of a certain book or a certain topic in a conversation, or someone's name or face flashes across my computer in some way, and something in me goes, wait a minute, I want to learn more about that. So it's a little sense of alertness even sometimes that you feel. And yeah, as you mentioned it, you could say it's one of the ways that your intuition signals to you. And the thing with our energetic breadcrumbs is we often dismiss them as insignificant, or we dismiss them if we can't see what they're leading to. It's like, well, if A doesn't go to B and C and D, then what's the point? Like, why would I take an art class? Because I'm not going to, turn this into a career, or whatever the thing is. So often you'll get an energetic breadcrumb, and then your rational mind, your ego, will dismiss it, think of it as weird or trivial or random or non-strategic. And so then we talk ourselves out of following and honoring those energetic breadcrumbs. But the thing is, when you do follow and honor them, they really do add up to a cake. And it is often, as Steve Jobs says in a commencement speech, it's often only in hindsight that all those dots connect. And so when you want to live a more soul-based life, it's much more of an emergent process. It's a process of discovery and meandering. It's non-linear. It's non-predictable. And our Western culture has not taught us to live and breathe and move in the world in this way. So it's a radically different approach to how you decide to make choices moving forward. You don't know sometimes what the end goal is. I mean, like you said, your 5-year vision, you don't even know what you want maybe in 5 years, but you're going to follow your energetic breadcrumbs to get there.
Yeah. Well, and I want to, let's take the the visualization of 5 years, because that's part of a 3-step process. I think the 5-year visualization is the third step in that process. Am I remembering that correctly?
Yeah, basically, it can be, yes.
Okay. I mean, and here I go being very linear and like
No, it's
1, 2,
fine.
3.
It's great.
But remind me what the first 2 steps are in this process and what the process is exactly.
Are you talking about from the visioning chapter?
Yes, I think so. You're talking about you are talking about how to I think it's as it relates to burnout. And it's like the idea that we need to be a little bit more kinder to ourselves. There's R&R. Number 1, R&R. Number 2, I can't remember the middle one, of course. And then number 3, it's kind of like, what's your 5-year vision plan?
Got it. Yeah. So, well, yeah, there's different ways that this information is organized in the book versus the TEDx talk. But so the 5-year vision is a great way to start to get clarity on what you really want. And I talk a lot in the book about creating a soul board, which is, using images, because the soul doesn't always speak in language. It often speaks to us in images and symbols and longings and feelings, desires and dreams and synchronicities. And so how do we access that level of information to get clarity on what we want in our lives? And so, doing a guided visualization is a great way to do that. You can visualize or imagine your future self. I have meditations on my website to help you do that. There's been really cool studies at Stanford, for example, where they aged people's faces in a machine. So they basically showed you yourself, 20 years from now, and they found people saved more for retirement when they saw their future self. So you really do make different choices when you connect with your future self. I find when I lead these visualizations, people meet with their future self and ask their future self questions, that they get these really profound answers, but they're also very universal. Like, I don't know, allow yourself more peace, or, but it has a deeply meaningful feeling when you do it yourself. There's different types of visualizations you can do. You can get very concrete and specific about what you're imagining, or you can go very general. And you said, like, you don't know what you want 5 years from now. And I've been in that place and gotten kind of stressed about it. And I used to think like, well, I have to have my vision all mapped out. All these people in my industry say that visioning is so important, and you have to have your plan and your vision of like, I'm going to And what I have come to believe is that how you feel is more important than the details. And if trying to get into the details brings in your mind too much, your critical mind, and you don't feel good because you're like, well, okay, what are my revenue streams and which programs am I going to be offering? And you start to get stressed out by the details, then you want to stop and go more generic and more high level and just into the feeling state of how do I want to feel? Because that's actually the most important thing. If you don't feel good in the details, don't do the details. And I used to think I needed to do the details. I would say, no, how you feel is more important than the details. My latest visualization that I just recorded this week, that's really cool. I was kind of given it in a meditation. I guess I channeled it in some ways. I'm not going to say I guess, because I have started channeling with these light councils. So let me not downplay that, because I'm proud of it, but it's also new and a little bit, it's my learning edge right now to own that. But it's really cool because I'm trained in hypnosis and past life regression healing. And so I take people down a staircase into your subconscious mind and then into a huge library filled with books. And you pick up a book that is what your life has been so far. And you review all the pages, like each page is a month for the first year of your life. And then each page is a year. You go all the way up to today. And then you put that book down and you choose a new book. And you notice how the cover is different and how the book feels different. And all the pages, you open it to how old you are today, and all the pages to the right are blank, and you don't know what is going to be in them, but you know that it's going to be really, really good. And you know that you're really excited about it. And I was given some information in a meditation that this particular visualization is actually going to help people jump timelines. Like if you believe in quantum physics, that there's multiple timelines happening all at the same time. It's a way to up level your whole life by, putting down that story and getting a whole new book and a whole new story. So I'm getting into things like that are way more, I don't want to say esoteric, but they're much more like feeling based than what is my 5-year vision and like what is my sort of linked to like a concrete business plan and where will I be living and you know what I mean, all of
Mhm.
those details, which that's a great way to do it if it feels good and works for you. But if not, I'd recommend going like more expansive, more high level.
Yeah, some a piece of advice that feels similar to that I received that I love is to pay attention to what you're paying attention to. I think it's so easy for us to get stuck in the solutioning, the details of the outcome. How is this gonna work for me? But like for example, something that's been coming up in my life a lot is we started to talk about this before we recorded is the connection with nature and the
Mm-hmm.
cyclical nature of nature. And it's the idea to me of getting out of our square boxes. We drive into work, we look at all day, we're looking at one right now, and having this connection with nature and the cyclical nature of the seasons, the nature of, everything, birth, death, life, the cycle of life. And how do we, so I'm reading this book right now.
Mm-hmm.
It's called, what is it called? I'm drawing a total blank. It's about, it's called The Last American Man, and it's by Elizabeth Gilbert. And it's about this man, Eustace Conway, who, for lack of a better way to explain this, homesteads in a very primitive way and buys like 1,000 acres of land in North Carolina and wants to teach people how to reconnect with nature and become more self-sufficient and have these really hard skills. And I feel like for me, that's what I'm craving and that's what I'm paying attention to. And so when I go out backpacking, that's my reset, that's my connection to my soul. My question that I keep having for myself is, how do I live in this modern world where everything that I do to create a livelihood for myself depends on a square box? And the draw towards the circular nature of life feels, number one, unknown, scary as hell, have no idea how to get there.
Mm-hmm.
And the question that I have is it possible? Do I have to
Mm.
completely leave this modern era to live in that world like a hermit or go live in the
Yeah.
Himalayas and become a monk? Or can I have some sort of marriage between the two?
I love that question. I think it's what a beautiful thing for you to explore for yourself. And in my own life, I have definitely noticed the cyclical nature of it, especially when, for me at least, leaving corporate America, running my own business has given me a little more spaciousness to feel into my own cycles. Because I think when I was in corporate America, I felt even more in the box. And I have noticed, I wrote a blog post about this. This woman, Gail Larson, taught me this journey well wheel of life that's based on the Native American, like 4 directions, where you start a project in the East with visioning and imagining it. And then it gets to a culmination in the North where it either there's some peak or plateau. So maybe you finish the project or it doesn't work out well. It's a failure, but either way, there's like a peak or plateau, it ends. And then you go to the West, which is when you're going into, I believe it's like grieving and letting
Mm-hmm.
go. And then you go to the South, which is resting and receiving support before you go back. And then you go back to the East to vision the next thing. And I've thought about that cycle a lot and how in Western culture, we only want the East and the North. It's like vision
Yeah.
complete, vision complete. As if we're just supposed to like just do those 2 things. We never want to do the grieving, the mourning, the rest and renewal, the seeking support. And I'm actually just coming out of a phase where I could not care less about my business. Like I had a bit of a crisis in my marriage and I had no energy and was like dealing with a lot of childhood stuff. And it was a month before my book came. It was the 6 months really before my book came out. And I just couldn't care. I couldn't care less about my work. And for me, every single time I've been in those quiet phases of nature, like the winter when everything goes underground,
Mm.
I have a really hard time letting myself fully drop into that. And I'm always trying to rush to get out of that phase of the cycle. And And then when I do naturally come out of it and I go into my next creative burst with right now, I feel like, oh, thank goodness my energy is back and I'm inspired to work again. That just happened in the last month. But I'm looking back and I'm like, oh, I really wish I gave myself more permission to be in that phase when I was in it. And I've learned every single time I go through a cycle, I have this experience where I come out of the quiet phase into the more active phase. And I go, oh, dang it. I wish I honored the quiet phase more. Because there's something about it that is existentially terrifying, where I feel like, if I were to really drop into this, what if I never leave this? What if the inspiration never comes back? What if I never want to take action? What if I never care about my business again? But I've also learned that that's just like a fear that's part of that phase of the cycle, because there really is almost a death that happens. If you think about even like a bulb in nature that goes underground in the winter, it is kind of going through a dying of sorts before it blossoms again, but then it always blossoms again. And I think in the West, we're scared of that. We're scared of that feeling of dying, of going underground, of the uncertainty, of the what if I never come out of this? And so we have a really hard time honoring it and dropping into it and giving it the space that it needs and deserves. But I bet if you let yourself, go into nature for like a longer stretch than you usually do, it would create such richer soil for the content that you're going to then create when you go into your next creative burst. And that's what I have found is like when I really honor the quiet phases, I do come out not just with more energy, but with more creativity, with a depth and a richness to the teachings that I'm offering that is not there if I go east, north, east, north, east, north, like vision, execute, vision, execute, vision, execute. First of all, I burn out, but second of all, the quality of my product is actually not as good. And so for me, it's like constantly reminding myself of everything I just said, because I forget all of it. And just naming how hard it is to be in the West and the South in those periods of grieving, mourning, letting go, resting, renewing, seeking support, and just tuning to my intuition and asking, Gail Larson has a process where she has you, I think, even face the 4 directions and see in your body what it feels like. Oh, which one am I in right now? Feeling that somatically. And so I think tuning into, okay, which of those 4 phases in the quadrant, like which cycle am I in right now? And like tuning into what is true for you and then honoring whichever cycle you're in and letting it be okay to be in it, There's another teacher, I'm blanking on her name, but she talks about like the potency of your creations and how you really do need time away from social media, away from the box, away from the world, to have your creations be more potent if you're in the kind of business that you and I are in. And so for me, like reminding myself that not only do I need, like, will it make me feel better, but it will make me more effective and better at my work if I get out of the box. And then I find I actually enjoy coming back to the box because I bring a richness to it that makes it more expansive, where I don't even feel like I'm in the box as much when I come out and I'm, in a natural phase of inspiration.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. So it's Journey Well, Wheel of Life, Gail Larson. Okay.
Yeah.
I definitely want to pick up a copy of that and make sure the link gets in the show notes also for everyone who wants a copy of their own.
It's not a book. I think she just has a blog post on it. But
Oh, okay. Perfect. Thank you. I love that. Awesome. So, let's see where I want to be mindful of our time. And I'm looking at a list of like 20 questions that we have barely scratched the surface of. And so I think what I want to focus on for the last maybe 1 or 2 questions is the idea of having a seat at the table, and we as women maybe feeling grateful for having a seat at the table. But the idea that we don't really always question how the table is set.
Yeah.
And what is the solution to this?
Yes. Yeah. So it's funny. That's probably the most quoted line in my book, that women are so grateful to have a seat at the table. We just haven't questioned how the table is set. I have found that in my own life and in the life of my clients. we need more women leaders, but we don't need more women leaders who are trying to act like men and burning themselves out in the process. And we do need a whole new structure with new policies, new, cultural messaging. And so how do we get that? How do we create radically new, paradigm for success? And I think that's basically what my whole book is about. But my fundamental premise is that the only way we're going to craft the radical solutions that our world needs is if we each individually get clear and confident enough to tune into our inner source, what I call our soul, and make choices in alignment with that place. And so an example that I was just reading about this morning that made me so inspired and happy is Yvon Chouinard, I might be pronouncing his name wrong, but the founder of Patagonia, the outdoor gear clothing company.
I read about this too. Go ahead.
Yeah. He decided, so Patagonia is a sportswear brand. I imagine most people are familiar with it, but he announced he's going to give away this multi-billion-dollar business instead of selling it. And he's going to go purpose instead of going public, meaning that he's going to turn over all the profits to a nonprofit trust that's going to then channel that money to fight climate crisis. And so there was like a great quote where he said, we didn't want to go public because even public companies with good intentions, they're under too much pressure to create short-term gain at the expense of long-term vitality and responsibility. And then he said, there's no good options available. So we created our own. And this is like, oh, yes, this is exactly what we need. And so in my opinion, as women, we have been conditioned to be rule followers and to like march along and be good little soldiers. And we buy into all these beliefs around what it means to be a working mom, a working woman, like what success is, this toxic hustle culture, this busy as a badge of honor belief. We believe it. We buy into those narratives without realizing that we create the narratives. So we can change them. And we have the power to create different options. But if we're following all the rules and being good little girls in our tidy little boxes, we're not going to do that. And look, this doesn't need to mean for everyone, like leave your corporate job and go start your own business. Yeah. Because for some of my clients, they're creating change from inside. Some of them are advocating for policy change or DE&I initiatives or having like really creative solutions for their companies or product marketing. One of them negotiated a 4-day work week without a decrease in her salary so she could spend 1 day a week with her kids. I mean, that's like a very small but tangible example of creating a new kind of success. And so I think we need to question, it's not just having a seat at the table. Like we need to not even have the table. We need to all be on like beanbag chairs. Right?
Yes.
Like how do we, so I loved his example because he looked at the options available of like sell to a private company or do an IPO and go public. And it's like, I don't like any of these. So I'm going to create something completely different. And you have to have so much trust in your own inner compass to make that kind of choice. And that's why I think what's going to help women create new models of success is to really start to listen to and trust ourselves. Because we know, our bodies know, we get information all the time when things feel good and when they feel terrible.
Yeah. So I want to circle back to the idea of visualization as it relates to busy as a badge of honor. And the question I want to ask is, what if busy was not a badge of honor? What would our days look like? What do you think? Like, you could just speak for yourself. Your ideal day, busy is not a badge of honor, rest, self-care, creativity, or, whatever it is that you want to spend or not spend your day doing.
Yeah.
What does it look like?
Yeah. I mean, for me, there would be more, and I did this the other morning and I was very proud of myself. Sat on my deck with a cup of tea and just stared at the redwoods in my backyard, and sometimes I'll take a whole hour, when I was in my period of rest and renewal a few months ago, I was taking like 2 hours in the morning to just meditate and journal and channel with these light councils. And I could not get on my computer before 10 a.m., which is unusual for me. So there might be a lot more of that, a lot more time for hobbies. And for me, that's pottery, maybe a little bit of gardening. And then I still really like periods of focused work. I mean, I enjoy working. I learned for myself that I don't really like to be in front of a computer, on average for more than like 3 hours a day, if possible. And the days when I honor that, and when I spend at least 1 hour in nature and at least 30 minutes to an hour moving my body, those are the days when I'm the happiest. So that for me is how, my day would flow.
Yeah. Oh, that's such a beautiful vision. And I feel very similar. It reminds me of the Ayurvedic principle of the cycles of the day, having specific times for these specific phases in our lives. Like, for example, I think it's the kapha period, which is kind of like that slow lethargic energy, is best utilized. And these cycles happen for us 2 times a day, in the morning and in the evening. So I think, if I can remember correctly, it's like from, I want to say 6 a.m. to 10 a.m., that lethargy. So that's the time, right? When you're sitting on the deck, you're looking at the redwoods, you're journaling maybe. And then the really productive hours of the day are supposed to be the pitta hour, which is like the fiery hours. So maybe you experiment with 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. doing the tasks that are more administrative or a little bit more mentally intellectual driven, to get that kind of stuff done. So, and I wanted to ask that as a final question to, allow everyone, to invite everyone that's listening to visualize what their day would look like if busy wasn't a badge of honor. And so with that said, and thank you for sharing your beautiful vision, Vanessa, is there anything else that you want to add? Anything I didn't ask you that you were really hoping to express, or if not, then what would you hope that people take away from reading your book, Soul Solution?
Well, I hope that people who read the book feel really seen and really held and really supported, and leave with a feeling of, it's okay. I'm exactly where I need to be, and all is well. And that, I have the power to change my life and change my circumstances. And I have tools now to do that. So that's what my wish would be. And I would love a world where, we allow ourselves to dream big, and then we trust ourselves to bring those dreams, into 3D reality. And I do think if we have more women asking the question on a daily basis, what do I really want? That is actually a very empowering question that could change our world.
Thank you so much for your time today. Okay, one final logistical question. Where should people go to follow you and find out more?
Oh, yeah. Great. I'm glad you asked, because you can buy the book anywhere you buy books: Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Indie Books. Sounds true. But on my website, I actually have a whole resource vault of free guided meditations, future self visualizations, a weekly planning tool, videos, downloadable PDFs, because I love to give people tools to actually use, bring all this stuff to life. And so it's sort of like a companion to the book. So if you get the book through my website, Vanessa Loder, LODER.com/soul, SOUL-solution, or just click on the big word at the top of the website that says book in all caps. We tried to make it super obvious. But yeah, if you go through that page and enter your name and email, then you'll get all the resource vault with all the meditations and visualizations that go along with each chapter of the book. So that's what I would recommend.
Oh, perfect.
And I'm going to put my new timeline jumping visualization on that page. It's not even on it yet because I just recorded it.
Oh, well, we'll make sure that gets into the show notes too, so that people can try that one. Me included, definitely. Thank you so much.
It. Tell me what you think of it. I'm super excited about it.
Just listening to you talk about it has me really excited. So thank you. I appreciate your time. It was a blast talking to you, and I loved getting to know you.
Oh, I love getting to know you too. You just have such a beautiful spirit, and it makes me happy to know you're out in the world doing this work and going into nature, having deep experiences there, and then bringing that back to everyone in this world. So thank you for the work that you're doing.
Well, everyone, that concludes another amazing episode of Outside the Studio. I hope you enjoyed yourself. I hope you learned something new, maybe remembered something old, maybe felt inspired to apply something to your life. You can hear my dog in the background. She's doing a little happy dance. So Daisy enjoyed it. anyhow, I wanted to just pop in here to wrap us up to say a couple of things. Number one, I have such an amazing team that helps me put these podcasts together. Without them, I wouldn't, be able to bring these amazing conversations to you. So thank you to my producer, my director of creative services, my sound editor, my engineer, Consistency Media. Don't know what I would do without you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And the amazing creation and artistic, musical genius, Drew Lovern. Thank you so much for putting together this music specifically for Outside the Studio. So unique to the show, only place you're ever going to hear it is right here. Thanks, you guys. You make my world go round. Stay well, everyone. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review, share on the socials, especially if it's a show that you think, hey, this could help somebody else. That's what this is all about, right? We're sharing information so that we're better, so that we're inspired, so that we're lifting each other up, and we're learning how to be in this world, living on this planet to the best of our ability, sharing information and inspiring one another. And that's my hope. That's my hope for the show. Take care.